Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have kind of a different video for you guys. This is going to be a versus video against the Benchmade Bailout in the 3V and Grivery scales and the Ad20.5 with 3V and Grivery scales. Now, these two share a lot of similarities, not just in their material, but also in the fact that these two have very, very fidgety locks and are both pretty well carried. Now, I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit with this Bailout because not a lot of people give this Bailout a lot of love. Most people prefer something like the Bug Out, which is understandable, but I'm a huge Bailout fan, so I'm just going to say the Bailout is well carried, at least for me. I love it a lot. These two, for me, though, are very big staples of carry in the knife community, so I've decided to put these two head-to-head because of their not only similar materials, similar locks, but also the fact that these are two kind of popular knives, at least for me and for a lot of people that I know. You know, these knives are great knives. Anyways, jumping right into it, starting off this versus video, I'm going to talk about ergonomics. Now, right off the bat, I can tell you this Benchmade Bailout is not the most ergonomic piece in the world. Unfortunately, with Grivery scales, you get some sharper edges, not really well-jimped or well-rounded edges. And that's because this isn't like G10 or micarta. This is kind of a cheaper material. It's not going to have as clean of a finish. So something like this Bailout is not extremely comfortable because it does feel a little sharp in there, but not to mention this thing is also extremely thin in the handles. So it's not going to fill the hand super duper well. Now the length is perfect in my opinion, but the length will only go so far because obviously you will really want to work on that hand feel, and this thing just doesn't fill the hand super well. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, as I'll talk about it a little bit later, but it just makes it a little less ergonomic than a lot of other knives on the market right now. Now, looking at this Ad20.5, this is what I would say is a very ergonomic knife. Now, there are some sharp edges, again, inside. This is still Grivery, of course, but everything is a lot better and form-fitted. So everything feels really nice. Not to mention it's a little thicker, which means it's going to fit in the hand quite a bit better. It really does fill the hand a lot better. Not to mention this actually has a finger choil. So even if you had a little bit of a bigger hand, you could still fit on this knife, which is an incredible thing. I would say hands down, this Ad20.5 is going to be taking the ergonomic kind of round just because this thing does have pretty impeccable ergonomics in a lot of regard. And even though, yes, it does have very sharp scales, which I talked about in the Ad20 review, 20.5, excuse me, it's still a lot more ergonomic than something like this Benchmade Bailout. Now, kind of going into the next round, I figure we will talk about blade shapes. So right off the bat, these two do have the same blade material, but two different blade shapes. We have a tanto point on the Bailout, and we have a clip point or drop point, however you see it. I've heard it called different things, on the Ad20.5. Now, which blade shape do I prefer? Funny enough, I do prefer the blade shape on the Benchmade Bailout. And it's not just the shape that I really like, but also the thinness of the blade. I find that the Ad20.5 is a lot thicker, leaving it to be, it's still pretty slicey because it's not a super thick blade, just so you guys know. I mean, here's the PM2 as reference. You guys can see it's not a super thick blade, but it's still relatively thick. So it's not going to be necessarily as slicey as something like the Benchmade Bailout, which in my opinion just has a little bit better blade geometry. This thing is extremely thin behind the edge and just cuts like a champ. This guy still cuts really well, and again, having that 3V blade like the Bailout is not going to dull super easy. It takes a long time for these knives to dull. But this knife is also obviously going to be a little less slicey. I also prefer the look of a tanto just a little bit more. I love the looks, and honestly, I found that tantos can be pretty practical, even though some would say it looks a little murdery. But this guy does form very well, does function very well is what I meant to say. It has good form and function, to be honest, but with that thin slicey edge and really thin behind the edge as well, this guy is just going to be a really great slicer. So in terms of blade, I'm going to have to give it to the Benchmade Bailout, even though the Ad20.5 still has a very sick blade, if you will. Now, I'm going to talk about locks, which right off the bat, I'll tell you this now, the 80-20.5 is taking this round. Hands down, it's got one of the nicest locks I've ever seen. I used to be a huge compression lock guy. Used to be my favorite lock, 100%. And then I got this guy in the mail, and I just couldn't stop flicking and closing this guy shut. I also saw some tests of this lock on YouTube and saw just how strong this thing can be. So at the end of the day, this is a strong, great, fast, fidgety lock, which I love a lot. Now, I'm not going to take away from the Axis lock at all either, because for how lightweight this knife is and how small this knife is, it is extremely tough. This lock has definitely got what it takes to go pretty far. Is it as strong as something like the Shark lock? Probably not. But at the same time, it's still a fairly strong lock. It definitely functions really well. It's still a super fast and fidgety lock. But just for me, I'm going to have to give the leg up to the Shark lock just because of its slightly faster closing and its much more, I guess, speedy approach. So that's really nice. Now I'm going to talk about kind of EDC ability. So which knife out of these two would I rather carry, just talking about weight and stuff like that. So right off the bat, I love carrying both of these knives. I carry them all the time. But if I were to say there was one knife, there we go, that I would rather carry, I would probably say the Bailout's a little more fun to carry because it's so lightweight. It slips in the pocket. You almost forget it's there. The 80-20.5, you know, it's a little bit thicker in the pocket. So like here's your Bailout. You can see it's very thin. It's quite a bit thinner than your 80-20.5. This guy's a little thicker. Again, the jimping is a little aggressive and it's a little bit heavier. So in your pocket, you're definitely going to feel this. Now, I will say this though. I do carry this knife a lot. So just because I'm hating on it and ragging on it a little bit now, I still carry this thing all the time and I'm pretty much just nitpicking here. But this guy is going to be a little heavier. Jimping is going to be a little sharper and it's going to be a lot more width in the pocket. This guy's a lot thinner in the pocket in every single regard. And even with that, has this cool little lanyard hole sticking out the top. So even though this is a deep carry pocket clip, a portion of your knife is still sticking out to make it easy to pull this thing out of your pocket. So I do appreciate that a lot. I think this knife really does function really well as an EDC piece and really does fit the pocket quite nicely. I enjoy it a lot. Now, this is one of those knives where I've heard people say, oh, this could benefit from some weight. But at the same time, this thing is just a beast when it comes to carrying because it's one of those knives that you throw in your pocket, you almost forget about, just like the Bug Out. So I would say in terms of EDC ability, I would have to give it to the Benchmade Bailout. Now I'm going to talk about quality here. So both of these knives were quite pricey. These were not cheap knives. This guy coming in at about 170 something, I believe, maybe like 169, 170. And then this guy coming in at about 189. These are both very expensive for what you're getting, that being Grivery handles. So it's a little bit of a letdown for both, but when paying prices like that, you expect pretty good quality. Now this guy, I have used to all hell, have not seen any failure in the blade, in the lock, in anything. I've used this in the kitchen and it's functioned really well. This blade has touched a lot of cutting boards and still hasn't dulled or anything like that. So this thing is finding its way to being really good quality for the price. The only part about this knife that I would say is pretty bad quality is just the handles. But again, it's just because it's plastic. And frankly, you know, plastic kind of irritates me sometimes. Whereas this guy has not dulled either. It has stayed sharp. Everything stayed true. But over time, it's developed a little bit of blade play. And I tried opening this guy up, fully cleaning it up, figuring out what the matter was. I tightened all the screws, you know, loosened them up a little bit, tried fiddling with it a little bit, worked on the pivot, and the blade play is just there. And I've found that a lot of people talk about blade play not only on this knife, but also on the Bailout. This is the Bailout, the Bug Out. There we go. It's just kind of something that happens, and really what you should do, and what I'm probably going to start doing, is kind of taking this guy apart and doing a full breakdown as opposed to just the slight breakdown I did. And maybe I just didn't put enough Loctite on the screws, whatever it is. But yeah, it's just a little frustrating that this guy developed some blade play. It's not really what I was expecting from this guy, but this guy is kind of developing a little bit of blade play, which again, for the price, kind of isn't great quality. You know, for a knife like this, for this price, you really want, you know, a blade that won't come loose on you or anything like that. Like this guy is 100% still true. No side to side, no front to back. It is in perfect condition. And again, that's something I would really like to see with this Benchmade Bailout. So in terms of quality, it's going to have to go to the Ad20.5. Now, going back to what I was saying before about price, which one of these has the better price tag? Personally, believe it or not, I'm going to have to say this is a tie. I think both of these have pretty cruddy price tags on them. Now, the Ad20.5, almost every single one I've seen is a little on the overpriced side, other than the one that's in titanium, because that price range kind of makes sense because it's titanium. But this guy probably should have been around the like 160, 150 mark, but wasn't. This guy should have been around probably the 120 to 130 mark, but wasn't. So again, I'd give it a tie just because these both are a little overpriced. But here's the thing. This guy has full steel liners, has a much thicker blade, a much bigger blade, and a much thicker handle. So of course it's going to be pricier than this guy. I can't compare these two like, oh, this one's more expensive than this one, so this one loses. No, this guy has a lot more stuff in it and a lot more material. This guy has no liners or anything like that and still manages to be this price. Now, I'm not going to give that to the Ad20.5 and be like, okay, so the Ad20.5 now deserves the leg up because it comes with more materials for the price. No, because again, there's about $30 difference between these two, a $20 to $30 difference between these two, and this guy has the more material because of that little extra price. So it's going to be a tie, and unfortunately that's going to be like the bad stuff is it's just, okay, these two obviously just don't really compare because their prices are so just out there. So that's a pretty big thing in and of itself. Now, overall, both of these knives are great. I'd say the slicier edge, the edge geometry, the carryability and stuff like that will go to the Bailout. This guy is a little bit easier to carry. This guy is a lot thinner and slicier. It is a lot lighter weight. But stuff like the lock, stuff like the ergonomics, and toughness is going to have to go to the Demko 20.5. So, for me, which one of these two knives win? Well, I'm probably going to have to give the leg up to the Ad20.5. This knife is just a whole lot better in terms of quality. It's a lot better when it comes to stuff like strength. It's a lot better when it comes to, you know, how it uses the 3V. I think 3V is a very tough tool steel and needs a very tough knife to go with it, and this is that tough knife. This is that knife that deserves this steel. Not saying that this knife can't be tough as well, but with how thin the blade is and everything like that, it's not really meant to be a super duper strong, tough knife. So I just have to say I'm giving the leg up to the Ad20.5 in this versus video, just because of its quality being so much better, just because it's a much better use of the material. But I do want to hear your guys' opinions in the comments. If you guys think that the Bailout's better or anything like that, I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you guys have any gripes with anything I said, obviously I'm always willing to hear you guys out. Now, there is one thing that I did not talk about. You guys probably realized that now, and it was the size of the knife. And the reason I did that, I kind of put that in the EDC category, like which one was better at EDCing. I didn't say anything though, because these two are the exact same size pretty much. You know, maybe favoring the Bailout a little bit, but I put these two next to each other and they're literally like the same size. So I didn't want to really mention the size because I feel like that would just, you know, do nothing, because these two are basically just the same size, obviously with this guy just being thicker, but I also mentioned that in that section of the video. So I just think it's kind of funny though. These two are the exact same size, which I think is, again, just hilarious. Now, with that being said, I figure before I end this video, I'd give you guys a little bit of an, I guess, teaser for my next review. And I guess I can just do a little bit of first impressions as well. This is the Spyderco Shaman. This is the M4 and micarta version. This is my first M4 blade. This is my first micarta handle. So this is a knife of firsts. But this knife is absolutely incredible, and I'm so excited to bring this review to you guys. I've been carrying it for the last 2 days. I'll bring this review to you guys hopefully by this weekend or by next week when I've been able to carry this guy for a week straight. Obviously, for those of you that don't know, I usually carry these knives for about a week straight before I give you guys the review to make sure you guys get the best possible review out there. Now, this is an amazing knife, and I'm very, very excited to bring you guys a review of the Shaman. So be looking out for that. But anyways, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, and thank you.